All right, good morning, everybody. Today is, we left off on Yud Amud Beis. Hopefully, I think you're actually going to touch today's daf at the end. Anyone of us to leave off early, I hope to get just to the Mishnah, or a little bit past the Mishnah on Yud Beis Amud Aleph, like the middle of the page. I think today is daf Yud Beis, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know. Yeah. So we'll go there. We'll make it through. It's actually a difficult daf today, so it doesn't really give up so much, but we'll see what we can do. If not, we'll have plenty of opportunity over the next 2 days to chazer and to understand it. So let's see. Amar Reb Chizkiya. Oh, sorry about that. Amar, we're maybe 2/3 of the way down on Yud Amud Beis. Amar Reb Chizkiya. Yeah, like I don't know, 12 lines or 15 lines from the bottom. 10b4. Those are the article. So Amar Reb Chizkiya, Tana Rabbi Huda Gad Gadus, Haktairas v'chol kavanas hatzibur ba'im mitzumas halishka. The Ketairas that was burned daily, that would come from the kavanas, the fund, and all kavanas tzibur would come from the chumas halishka, from the funds that were from chumas halishka, from that were collected. And Mizbeach Hazav Chol Kli Sharis Ba'im Meiser Nesachim. And the Mizbeach Hazav, right? There's two Mizbeachs. There's one on the inside, right, by the menorah and the shulchan, inside the Heichal. So that one was the smaller one, which incense was burnt on there. So that was considered almost like a Kli. So that was a Mizbeach Hazav Chol Kli Sharis. Those come from the leftover funds of Nesachim. We'll see later on what that means, right? There was Nesachim funds. And the Mizbeach Ha'oila, the larger Mizbeach, which is outside in the courtyard, and all the other costs of the Heichal Zaros, those come from the Bedek Habayis, except for the wall outside in the courtyard, and those are by the Nashim, and those come from the Sherei Halishka. Those come from the leftovers of the Lishka. We'll also have to define what that is. And how do you say Tani Avne Yushleim Olim Ben? But the question is, how do those come from the leftovers of the Lishka? If there's a rule that leftovers by Shiraim, there is no Me'ilo by there, right? If you chayv Me'ilo, that means it has Kedushas Aguf, right? But if the funds come from something which is left over, the Shiraim, which doesn't have Kedushas Aguf, so how is there Me'ilo? So the answer is no. Kramer, we saw Remeir. Remeir Amar Molim B'Shiraim. There is Me'ilo by Shiraim. Even on that, on Rabbi Chia, Klum Amar Rav Meir El B'Sech Shnaso. That which we say there is Me'ilah from Shiraim, it's only when it's the Shiraim of the current year. In other words, the Shiraim for the current year is Me'ilah. And over here, when you talk about the Shiraim of the Lishka, that the leftovers, by definition, the Shira Lishka is coming from last year's funds. So last year's funds, there shouldn't be Me'ilah in that case, according to Rameir. So Reb Chizkiya. So that it doesn't give. So Amar Reb Chizkiya, Tana Rabbi Huda Gad Gadus. Hashochan v'amenorah v'mizbechos v'aparoiches ma'akvim es hakarbanos. Div Remeir. Says Remeir, the shochan in place, the menorah, the mizbeach, the paroches, all of those are ma'akev, the karbanos. In other words, if those are not in place, and one offers a korban, it doesn't work because the shochan and menorah and the mizbeach and the paroches, the curtain that separates the kodesh HaKodashim, if those are not in place, the korban doesn't work. In the ma'akev is a korban, ella. Nothing is ma'akev the korban. No, the korban is good. Even the shochan's not there. It was removed for whatever reason. It became tummy and it was taken out. Whatever it was, right? Nothing is ma'akev unless the karkor, which is like there's like a lattice around the mizbeach and the keren and the horns of the four horns of the mizbeach. Bilvar. Just those. As long as if those are intact, then it's okay if the others are not in place. And this is not what Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yossi ben Chanina says. It's Tarin Amrin. Both of them said, "Kol hein dechsiv noichach ma'akiv." Anytime it says the word noichach in the pasuk, right, when it talks about the mizbeach, it says v'samta menorah noichach hashochan, right? You use the word noichach, right? Opposite of, right, is ma'akiv. In other words, that's telling you that if it's not there and one offers a korban, it's no good. And tzela ain't ma'akiv. When it says tzela to be on the side, that is not ma'akev, right? The pasuk says, "Hashochan titain al tzelat safon," right? You place it at the side of the north, right? So Tzela is not Ma'akev according to Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yossi ben Chanina. V'am Rav Shmuel bar Nachman Shem Rabbi Yonasan. V'afilu Tzela Ma'akev. He holds no, even if it says Tzela has to be on the side, that is Ma'akev, i.e. the Shulchan would be Ma'akev. V'amar Rabbi Eloi b'Shem Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman. V'afilu Sima Ma'akev. Even if it says Sima, it says over there, right, to place the Mizbeach, that is, right, it says Vesamta, right? Vesamta, you place, so the Sima is Lashon of Ma'akev. And Amar Rabbi Chanina, Kam Bevaras Shebifnim, Karas Rechutz. Maybe it's different. Maybe if it's talking about Bevaras Shebifnim, then it all has to be there. But Bevaras Shebechutz, but something that places outside, i.e. on the outer Mizbeach, maybe that wouldn't be Ma'akev. And Amar Rabbi Chanina, Shachatzitz Gedola Haisa B'bnei Kohanim Gedolim. Right, there was a big waste, right, when it comes to the Kohanim Gedolim. In other words, they would just sort of show off either their money, their wealth. Why? Because we mentioned earlier that the Kohanim Gedolim used to go ahead and pay for the ramps, for the one for the Paraduma, right? They would pay for that ramp, which would be taken out to be like a special schus for them to offer Paraduma. So they would pay for their own ramp, all the gold and all that, which it was cost 60 gold coins to go at these, I guess, are a larger kikari zav, right? 60 of them to go ahead and build a construction for the ramp. Because now, as no one would go ahead and use a ramp that was built by their predecessor, they would build their own. And therefore, it almost is a big waste of money. Like they're using all their money to go ahead and, build a ramp. It almost seems like they covet for themselves, right? Big fancy ramp. However, so, however, Rabbi Ula said, no, he argued for Rabbi money. He says, Vatani, Shimon Tzadik, Shtei Paros Asa. And Shimon Tzadik, who we know did everything the right way, right? He actually had 2 paradumas, and Loi Bekevish Haitzi as Zu, Hotzi as Zu, right? So right? So he offered 2 of them during his time, and he built 2 different ramps. He didn't use the same ramp. He rebuilt the ramp, right? He built the ramp with his own money. So you're gonna say Shimon Tzadik, right, was like showing off his money, right? Rather, what we say, Makadun, what are you gonna say? So in other words, because of the chashuv mitzvah of the paraduma, it was like a covet to the para. It wasn't for a covet asma to show off his money. Rather, it was a covet for the mitzvah of paraduma. Therefore, he did that. And Tani Zizik Sam Hayyitzi Mekan Mekan Kadesh Lo Yatza Yatzi Zakon Vitamo. And we said over there that they built like walls on both sides in order for the Kohanim shouldn't lean over or look over to become Tameh, because they had to be very careful about the entire process. And Rabbi Kiva says Ein Mishtachrin. So we had a machlokes in the Mishnah in terms of the base Hamikdash, whether they do business, right, with the funds and basically and use the profits for the base Hamikdash. So he said over there, Elim Ratzah Hefset Shalom Askar Hekdesh Mutter. But if they make a case where basically either way the profits, right, in other words, there won't be a loss, there's a guarantee won't be a loss, and therefore they do business then with the money, then it would be mutter to do business with Hekdesh. Kahada Bar Zimda, just like the story of Bar Zemina, he's pakid Gabe Midal Yasmin, right? He went ahead, he used to go ahead and gather and collect money for Yisaimim. And also Rabbi Manes, he says, Amarlei, he goes, am I allowed to do it? So he said, if you want to go ahead and do it, if you want to go ahead and do business with it, and you'll be personally responsible for any losses, right? And just any gains will go there. But if they won't lose that money, then it'll be mutter. And also Reb Chibra did the same thing. He had money of the Yisraelim, he did business with it, and they basically guaranteed. He took whatever money it was, and he says, okay, if there's a loss, I'll cover my own personal funds. Otherwise, the rest of the money will go to Hekdesh. Meiser Peiros, the money that came from the Peiros, right? Peiros doesn't mean, right, means the profits, right? So Masnisa Rabbi Shmuel. This Mishnah is like Rabbi Shmuel. The Rabbi Chia Bar Yosef Pasuk Masnisa. Rabbi Chia Bar Yosef explained the Mishnah. Meiser Peiros Schar LaHekdesh. Meiser Nesachim Sa Revis. So he says that which it says the leftover Peiros, that refers to the profits of the of Hekdesh. In other words, they were doing business, which would go like Rabbi Shmuel. And when it says Meiser Nesachim, the leftover Nesachim, which we said we were defined, so that is according to this opinion of Reb Chia bar Yosef, that Meiser Nesachim, leftover Nesachim, Zo Saravis, right? That is Saravis. In other words, they used to go ahead and basically have a contracted price, and therefore, if it was out of the price, they would always get more from whoever they were buying the price. Or I guess wherever they're buying for, they would get an extra saw. So therefore, that extra saw was actually profit, and therefore, since the hektish was getting more than they paid for, and then now they had more product, and therefore they didn't use all of it. So therefore, the extra amount was profit, and that refers to the Meiser Nesachim. And Rabbi Yochanan Passer Masnisa Meiser Peros is Saravis. He says no, that which says Meiser Peros, right? The profit from the Peros. Right, that is referring to the Saravis, that is referring to the extra saw, and Meiser Nesachim the Berutzin. Notice that Nesachim was the Berutzin. They used to go ahead and basically pile on and have a larger amount. They would go over the top, and therefore there would be overage, and they would even it off, and the extra amount would add up, and that could be sold, and therefore that was extra profit to hektish. I've less later Rabbi Chia bar Yosef Berutzin. So Bar Chia bar Yosef, which was the first opinion we saw, he doesn't hold of overage, right? The extra amount. So Rab Chizkiah mad nafal saravis nafal beris. No, the same amount that we said was the extra, the saravis, right? The fourth saw, the extra amount. That is the same halach. That would also go for the berus, and that would be basically the same monies. And I'll daite the Rab Chia bar Yosef nicha. Right? It works out well according to Rab Chia bar Yosef because it says Emishtachim shel hektish af lo yishal nim. So he said that when we say that according to Rabbi Chia bar Yosef, it works out well. Why is that? Because Rabbi Kiva said in the Mishnah that we don't do any sort of business with hektish, and not only that, we also don't do business avashalanim, right? Even with the money from poor people. So therefore, right, both Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Chanina, both of them agree that that in terms of peiros, that they had the same opinion when it comes to peiros, that it came from that. In other words, since they can't do business, therefore they didn't agree to the meiser peiros. However, I'll die to Rabbi Yochanan, Kashav, according to Rabbi Yochanan, right, who was the second opinion we saw, who said he did not include, right, because remember, he did not include schar lahektish. In other words, them doing business, right, included any of them, right. So Valtanina, Amdu Mishalosh, Yisabig Me'arba, right? If the price would go 3, then they would take it at 4. If it was Tanina, we go over there, Zevazel lo yimodim peiros. And nevertheless, it says over there that neither one of them said that it was motor peiros. But over here, it seems to see that they did agree that there was meister peiros. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, right, when it says meister peiros, it wasn't referring to hektish doing business. So according to that's a kasha. So the Gemara answers, "Lo yomodim peiros b'kaitzis v'echavamodim hayu b'klisharis." He says, yes, that which we say that they couldn't do, that there weren't profits from business, that was referring to that money going to the extra olos that would be going on the mizbeach. However, they would agree that if there was the profits, that was used for klisharis. And therefore, it was mutter to do. It wasn't mutter to do with the money going to karbanos. It wouldn't be used for that, but it would be go ahead and to use. To go ahead and buy klisharis. And on kadom, beirut seit tzibur. So when the halacha comes to the overage, so the overage when it comes to karmas tzibur, so you use the extra amount. And the extra amount it was part of the tzibur. But if you say that you use the overage, you fill it over the brim and then you level it off, and it comes from a korban yachid, someone's personal mincha, so now that personal mincha is belonging to hektish, and therefore that's to be used. It's from a person, and it's not from the tzibur. So Gemara says, no, that what you learn. A woman can go ahead and donate the clothes for her son who's a kohen gadol as long as she donates to the tzibur. So to over here, the overage, the extra amount of flour that goes on top, that the solas that goes on top, that amount being provided is also once again given over to the tzibur, and therefore now it's considered to be public funds and not private funds. And that's only talking about when we talk about a liquid, something which is say lach, right? That's something like the oil. However, but what about the dry? So he says no. Over there, and when it comes to kachim, or nesachim, they became sanctified, right? They put let's say the wine in the kli or the oil in the kli, and therefore became kadosh. The nimsa zevach pasul. Turns out that the offering became pasul. Now you have the nesachim, which are basically like secondary; they're part of an animal offering. So what do you do with that? If there's another korban, you can go ahead and offer with it. But if not, but if they're not, and therefore they now, since it's sanctified, so therefore they have to go ahead and leave it overnight in order for that to become pasul, because they can't use it again. So you see over here that if in the case of where when you have the overage in case of something which is beirutze yavesh, something which is dry, right? Then they would not become kadosh in the kli. In other words, so not necessarily becoming in the kli would make a kadosh, like the case over there. It was basically stipulated that if the korban was good, it could be offered, but if the korban wasn't good, then then it would not be. Fine. Mishnah on the bottom of Yud Aleph, Amud Aleph. Meiser haktairas ma hayu aisin ba. The leftover ketairas, so they made ketairas. Now, remember, the Beis Hamikdash is not in business of of doing all these items, right? They don't raise animals. They don't. All they do is they have money, right? They have money, and then they go ahead and they purchase assets. They purchase items, flour and oil and all that from other people. They don't do their own, right? Just like government, right? Government doesn't own things. Government, pays construction workers to build the roads, right? The workers don't work for the government. They work for private contractors, right? So the ketairas, they used to go ahead and be provided ketairas from certain families, we'll soon see. And that was, they purchased it, and now they own it after they purchase it. But sometimes there's leftover. So what would they do for the leftover ketairas? Because remember, you need the anything which is offered to be done during that year, right? During that year, it has to be the same year. So once the year is up, so what do you do with the leftover ketairas? So they used to go ahead and they would basically use that for the payment of the workers of the umanan who are owed money from the mikdash. And basically, what they would do is they have this ketairas, and they would say, okay, now there's money to go ahead, and we owe these people money. So they would basically go ahead and deconsecrate the money upon the money that's of the workers' money. And then they would go ahead and now once they remove the kedusha from the ketairas, right? They would go ahead and give them the ketairas, right? And then now the people have the ketairas, right? They have the ketairas, and the ketairas is still perfectly good ketairas to use, right? This is, it had the fine incense that was made. So now they have the incense that, these workers don't necessarily want the ketairas, right? They can't go ahead and pay their bills with ketairas. Now Hektish would use new funds to go ahead and buy that ketairas from them. So therefore the people would end up with the money. And
that means that it's no longer me'ilah?
There's no right. In other words, well, that's not me'ilah, right? There's no. The question was like this: they can't pay them in something which is kadosh, but they can't use the ketairas. They can't just continue using the ketairas. So basically, what they need to do is deconsecrate, right? They need to be mischalel the ketairas. So now it becomes like chulin, and then buy it with this year's funds. So now the ketairas was bought with this year's funds, and this year's funds have kedusha. Now they put new kedusha in. So basically, they need to get rid of last year's kedusha, right? And then use that, and then put this year's kedusha on it. So that you can't just go from last year's kedusha to this year's kedusha. You have to go last year's kedusha to chulin, to mundane, deconsecrate it, and then re-sanctify it with this year's funds. And it will work out perfectly well if then all of a sudden they have the money in on time, i.e. the money, the shkalim start to come in on time. They would go ahead and purchase from Tshuva Chadasha, however, but if not, then they would still use Mina Yishan. They can still use the leftover from last year's, to go ahead and repurchase it for the purposes of using this year. So the Gemara wants to know. In fact, the Gemara 3 lines from the bottom of Yud Aleph from Aleph. Understand, when the people over here, right? When it says over here, they go ahead and deconsecrate the money, right? Hektish had money that they were going to pay these workers. Let's say $100, right? So that money is kadosh. So how can you go ahead and deconsecrate something by using money that Hektish owes these people, which is $100, and Keturis of $100, and say, okay, we're going to take the kedusha out of the Keturis by putting, by switching it with the money. But the money is also kadosh. You can't deconsecrate like kadosh on kadosh. So it says, no, you're missing a step. I'm Rabbi Shimon bar Bisna, Mevi Mos Umichalan al Binyan, right? They bring money, right? And they go ahead and basically deconsecrate that money on the work of these workers, right? So they go ahead and take hektish money, and now the workers, right? They build stones or whatever it was, and then because they built it, then they deconsecrate it on the work which they did, right, ala binyan, and then once now the money has been deconsecrated because it was traded for work, right? Then maybe k'toros mechal, and then they bring the k'toros and they're mechal the money on they're mechal the money on mechal the k'toros on that money. And then they go ahead and give them now the workers with the scar the k'toros, which is be deconsecrated upon the money. So, and then from there, they use the new shkalim to go ahead and buy the Keturis. So instead of being 3 steps, it's actually now 4 steps, right? They deconsecrate the money on their work, right? Because remember, these workers, their work is not kadosh until money from hektish, right, swaps with it, right? So they get paid, they deconsecrate the money on the work, right? So now they have money. Now they have money, which is their own, which is regular money. Now is miskalel, right? And then they switch the money for the Keturis, and then they take new monies, and then they buy the Keturis back from them, and now they have their money, which is deconsecrated, and the Mikdash has their Keturis, which is now good to use for this year. And Oysan Hamos Ma'ayos Behed. So what they do is Rabbi Omer, Omer Ani Inasu Lebeis Garmu Lebeis Aptinus. So he says over there. Now they have the money, right? It was deconsecrated with it. So what did he do with the old monies that was set aside for it? So he said, they used to go ahead and give that to the base garment with base aftinos. Why them? Because they were the family that basically it was money that was due to them for their work of pita maktaris and ma'aselech alpanim. They knew the special art of making the special incense, and they know how to make the lechem panim, and therefore it will go to those people. The money would end up by them. And Amar Rav Shimon bar Yitzchak, however, he says, "V'hein shayu chayavin lehen ma'is mishar rishayna." Right? That was only when they were owed money from their work from before. However, if they weren't owed money, then they can use these funds from here for that. And Reb Chia bar Baba, so Reb Chia bar Baba asks, so what happens, right, if they didn't? So Asa Reb Chia bar Baba b'shem Reb Yasi, because they said they used to go ahead. If not, they used to go ahead and use those funds to go ahead and purchase karbanas to go on the mizbeach. And Rabbi Ba bar Kohen by Kumei Rabbi Yasi says Michlava Shitas Rabbi Chia bar Ba. It seems Rabbi Chia bar Ba actually switched on Shita. Why? Taman Tzrichale v'chab Shitale. First, he asked the question, right? Rabbi Chia bar Ba, he was one who asked, and over here he says Pasha they use it for karbanos. So what is it? Why did he ask in one case, and all of a sudden in the other case he was like it was suffix? So he says no. That which he asked was b'kli. He wanted to know if that extra money, right, the money that they used, they would sell the kataris for the extra money from there. Can that be go ahead and used to buy kli? But that which is pasha to him was the case of b'kayis lemizbeach. In other words, if he wanted to go ahead and buy olos, that certainly he never was masafik with that. He knew he can go ahead and buy karbanos for the mizbeach. The only question to him was, can you go ahead and use it to purchase kli sharis? And why was the question of purchasing klisharis? What is the aspect of klisharis have to do with the kataras? These palgun is actually there's a machlekes, right? Pitma b'chulin. If one goes ahead and makes the kataras, right, inside chulin, right, inside kalim that are chulin. So Rabbi Yasi be Rabbi Chanina Amar Psula. He says that it's Psula, and Rabbi Shua ben Levi Amar Ksher. He says Ksher. In other words, the question is, do you have to go ahead and make the ketores in a kli sharis, in a kli that has kedusha, and a kli basically owned by the Beis Hamikdash, or can I go ahead and use something which is tahor, right, a regular kli for my house? So Rabbi Shua says, Rabbi Shimon Levi says it's fine. However, Rabbi Yossi Chanina says no, it's possible. And what's the machlekes here? So my time of the Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina says kodeshi shetei havas bekodesh. So Rabbi Yossi says it says kodeshi that it has to be b'kedusha. It has to be made in a klisharis. And my time Rabbi Shimon Levi, what does he say? Rabbi Shimon Levi says no, kodeshi. When it says the pasuk says kodeshi, it says shetei ba mitrumas halishka. It just means that it comes that from the Trumas Halishka, right? That as long as the funds that are paid for are for the Trumas Halishka, however, the Kli itself can be a regular Kli. And Amar Rabbi Yasi be Rabbi Bun, Asid Rabbi Yasi ben Chanina Kishmul. And with Rabbi Shimon Levi, Rabbi Yechanan. This machlokes that we had of whether the Kli has to be made in a Kli Sharis or not is actually is similar to machlokes between Shmuel and Rabbi Yechanan. That Rabbi Yasi ben Chanina, who holds that it has to be done in a Kli Sharis, is like Shmuel. We'll soon see why. And Rabbi Levi holds like Rabbi Yechanan. The Tanina, what's that machlokes? There we learn in the Mishnah. It says Hamakdish Nechasav. One is Makdish is Nechasim. We're going to see this Mishnah on Yud Beis Amud Aleph, which is today's daf, right? It says Hamakdish Nechasav. And there were things in there that were fit for Kavanas Tzibur. And what was that? Rabbi Yechanan Omar Ketores. He says that refers to a ketores. So Rabbi Yechanan appears to say, right, that it was not made in a klishares. A person his objects, he's makdish. So he's makdish objects. How can ketores be fit? It must be that it can be fit because it doesn't need to be in a klishares. And Amar Rabbi Oshia says no. Tifat Uman Michel Beis Avtimos Shahaya Naita B'Schar Ketores. Maybe that case over there was not a regular kli. Maybe over there that was referring to he had a klisha, right? There was money, right? Because he was the house of Avtinus, who was paid funds from the Ma'aseh Ketores, and therefore it's not a good proof. And with Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Yossi holds like Shmuel, who says it does not have to go ahead and be in a klisharis. Rav Huna b'shem Shmuel machteshes oisu asa b'klisharis lekadesh. He says when he says in the, when it comes to the machteshes, in other words, that which they go ahead and they pound and they make the incense with. So they used to go ahead and make it in a klisharis. So obviously, since they made it in a klisharis, it must be because it has to be in the kedusha. And Amra Rabbi Yasi Bei Rabbi Bun, Amra Rabbi Chuna Kumei Rabbi Yasi, Davar Shekadosh B'Klisharis Nifta. Something that was made in klisharis can be redeemed, right? It can't be, because we know something, if it was made in a klisharis, right? Therefore, it has kedushas aguf. If it has kedushas aguf, it has to be, it can't be redeemed. So how could you say the leftover is redeemed? They deconsecrate it. Similarly, velo Shmuel. This is not a halacha of Shmuel. Shmuel taught the Shmuel Amar kalhu b'maiser. Right? When it comes to the meiser, when it comes to the leftover, we have a special kula. In other words, yes, normally something which is used during the year, the ketores, that can't be redeemed, right? That has kedushas aguf. But since it's the meiser ketores, it's the leftover ketores, therefore there's a special kula that we allow you to go ahead and basically deconsecrate it, despite the fact that it previously had kedushas aguf. These palgunas, the machlekes, haisir tamimim. If you have some tamimim, they used to have animals for the entire year, right? Remember, the funds were purchased for the korbanos of the year. So even towards the end of the year, they used to have backup animals in case there was a moon, right? So they always have animals, and then right at the end, they would have a couple extra animals, and then they couldn't just use it for next year because next year has to be used with next year's funds, right? When it comes to Nisan. So what do you do with the old ones? So haisiru tamimim. Shmuel Amar niftim tekesmimim. You can go. Shmuel says you can go ahead and redeem it, right? How could you redeem him, right? So he said, and it must be that it's a special rule. Rabbi Yechanan Amar niftim kepsula mikdashin. They have to go ahead and redeem them like any other animals which have a mum, which develop a mum. So you see clearly that Shmuel holds you can go ahead and redeem something which does have kedushas aguf. And similarly, hasir seirim, if there is seirim left over, right? Al daid Shmuel, according to Shmuel, al oila niftes lokol shein chadas, right? If an ola, right, which is supposed to be offered, right, for the tamimim, right, for the talmud, right? If those can be redeemed, so certainly also we can say a chadas is redeemed. And al daid Rabbi Yechanan, And according to this Rabbi Yochanan, so Amar Rabbi Zira, according to Rabbi Yochanan, who argued with Rabbi Shmuel and says they have to go ahead and develop a mum. So I'll die to Shmuel. So he says, they should go ahead and graze out in the field and develop until they develop the mum, and then you go ahead and redeem them. And Amar Rav Shmuel Rav Yitzchak, and then they are used once they develop mum, and that money goes ahead and used for animals to go ahead and offer on the mizbech. So the Gemara says Vikashya. Yesh chatas shekriva. I understand. You said leftover chatas. So how can you use a chatas and use the leftover money to, when you redeem it, use that money for an olah? So he says no, it's different. That which they was set aside for a chatas, it doesn't mean that it already had kedushas chatas, right? Because the korban tzibur is different. The only time it gets its kedusha is basically at the moment of shechita. Once you shecht it, now it's l'shem chatas, and now it's good. So in other words, even though the animal was going to be used for a chatas tzibur, but it never was, so therefore, since it never was, it's still able to go ahead when it develops them to redeem it for an olah. And Arachia Tanai Beis Din who Alamaisa Shigav Olas, right? It's a condition of Beis Din that it can be used to go ahead and offer it as an olah. Fine. Now, Mishnah. Let's do the Mishnah. Let's get down to the Gemara. At least this is actually today's daf, so we're almost catching up, right? So we see there is light at the end of the tunnel. You just need like 4 days to catch up. Now, Hamakdish Nechasav, one who's makdish his items that he owns. And there were things in there that were fit for a kavanah tzibur. We'll define what that is in the Gemara. Those can be used to give to workers as their schar. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. That's the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. In other words, it can't necessarily be used as is, right? And we can't be sold if used for bedek abayis. So it's going to be used to pay workers who are owed money from the hekdesh. Those items will be used to pay them. And Allah ben Azza, no, that's not what we do. Rather, they go ahead and they put them aside for they were mafresh those for the for the workers, right? So he says, 1 second. The other one was that Yinasulumnan Baskaran, right? But according to Ben Azai, who argues with Rabbi Kiva, so he said over here, he said they have to be redeemed over there, right? When it comes, because this is referring to the Ketores, but over here, right. So according to the Rabbi Kiva, they can just be given to the workers. According to Ben Azai, they have to be redeemed in the way we discussed last time regarding the leftover Ketores, the way they would be mischal the money, right? Is elam afrishim mischar umnin, such as they would deconsecrate it upon the payment of the umnin, and then they would give them these items to the workers, and then they go ahead and repurchase it for the Truma Chadasha. So that's what they would do with the same process. As according to Rabbi Kiva, he says they can just be given to them as because there's already hektish in it, because a person, he was makdish his items, those can be given straight directly. There doesn't have to be any sort of deconsecrated. And hamakdish nechasav, one who was makdish is nechasav vayibehen behema ruyal gabizbech, and there was an animal that could be offered. So if and there is a charm and a kavos amongst them, so what do you do with this? So machlok has been Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Eliezer, zechari machru l'tzarchei olos. This is the male ones which are offered as an olah. So you sell those, and then you buy olas with it, and then you use it for olas. And the kavos you machlu l'tzarchei zivchei shlamim. And then the female ones, you go ahead and you sell them and use them for shlamim. U'dmeim yipolo im shar nechasa lebedek abayis. So you sell them to people who need to go ahead and buy shlamim. So now you have the money from the sales, right? And then all the money, right, should go ahead and the money goes to the bedek habayis. The bedek habayis is used for the proceeds of selling the animals for the people who need it. And Rabbi Shua says no. Zecharim asma yigruva olos. When it comes to the males, you can go ahead and offer them. However, the females, those you should go ahead and sell to those people who need to go ahead and bring shlamim, olos, and then with that money, instead of giving to bedek habayis, you can go ahead and use that money to buy olos. Other types of nesachim, nechasim, not the sachim, nechasim, the possessions, properties, those fall to bedek habayis. That money, when they were sold, is used for the upkeep of the mikdash. And Amar Rabbi Kiva says Rabbi Kiva between this argument of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, Royani as divrei Rabbi Eliezer mi divrei Rabbi Yeshua. The words of Rabbi Eliezer is more logical than that of Rabbi Yeshua. Why? Rabbi Eliezer, he should be doisav, right? Rabbi Eliezer, he has the same thing when it comes to males and females in terms of you sell them and use the money for other usages, as opposed to Rabbi Yeshua, he holds you could even offer the males, but the females he can't offer. But Rabbi Yeshua Cholik, he says no. And Rabbi Yeshua Chilek, and he differs. Amar Rabbi Pipus, Shamati is Divrei Shneim. Actually, I heard both of them. And Hamakdish beferish kadiver Rabbi Eliezer. One who says Makdish beferish, right? A person who goes ahead and he says he's Makdish his cars, his animals. He includes all his items, including these animals. So basically, when he does that, then it appears like Rabbi Eliezer. Then it appears that he's not being makdish anything with the purpose of offering, right? Because I can't offer my table and I can't offer my cars. So when I say animals, why would I be referring to offering the animals? So therefore, everything is basically sold and the money is used for karbonos. However, hamakdish stam, one says hamakdish all my possessions, right? Without specifying what kind. Therefore, you can say, okay, the tables and the cars, those are sold for bedek habayis. The animals, those can actually be offered. So therefore, he would hold like Rabbi Papias, he would hold like Rabbi Shua in that case. And hamakdish nechasav, the person's makdish is his items, and he has things that are fit for the mizbeach, like yenos, shmanim, va'ofos, yayin or wine, right? It was used for the nisachim, shmanim and oils, va'ofos and birds. Rabbi Eliezer, Aimer, yimachlu tzarchei oiser hamin. You can go ahead and sell to those people who need that. V'yavud b'yam olos. Now the money from those sales of people who need the wine, oil, and birds, that money you go ahead and you can go ahead and offer olos, ushanas, and all the other property the person has. You call it the bedek habayis. Should go ahead and use for the upkeep of the bedek habayis. Let's just do a couple lines in the Gemara. And we talked about hamakdish kavanah sibur. What were we talking about? The kavanah sibur. We had the machlos in Rabbi Kiva ben Azai. So we actually sort of hinted to it because we were discussing how you pay the workers with the ketairas. So Rabbi Yechon Amar ketairas, he says, is referring to ketairas. That was what the person he consecrated in his house. And Amar Rabbi Oishia Tifate be'omen shel v'shel v'avtim b'shaya naita b'schar v'ketar. So talking about one of the workers of the house of Atidus that he had, right, these type, when he was makdish his possessions, amongst his possessions were the ketaras that he made for the purposes of the temple. So my time of the Ben Azai, what's the reason according to Ben Azai? He says you have to deconsecrate it. Shein hekdesh mischal al malacha el alamos, because we can't say that's deconsecrated for doing work. Rather, you have to deconsecrate on money, and therefore you have to go ahead and deconsecrate it with on the money first, and then you go ahead and then that repurchase it through hekdesh. All right, we'll stop over here at the two dots. Everyone have a good Shabbos and a good Yontif, and Mirz Hashem on Monday, right? There's 2 days we're missing, so actually this is today's daf, this is today's Yubez. Once again, we're going to fall behind, but Mirz Hashem, we'll come back, and then we'll catch up again. So by next Shabbos, hopefully, Mirz Hashem, we'll all be caught up. But Monday, regular time, I guess at 7:20. Oh, actually still not talking. Let's say, we'll aim for 7:15, but we'll get there. So everyone have a good Shabbos and a good Yontif.
Good Shabbos.
Shabbos, good Yontif.